This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever think about switching insurance companies to see if you could save some cash? Progressive makes it easy. Just drop in some details about yourself and see if you're eligible to save money when you bundle your home and auto policies. The process only takes minutes, and it could mean hundreds more in your pocket. Visit Progressive.com after this episode to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary. Not available in all states.
To enjoy this episode of Forensic Tales ad-free, check us out on Patreon. Patreon.com/Forensic Tales.
Forensic Tales discusses topics that some listeners may find disturbing. The contents of this episode may not be suitable for everyone. Listener discretion is advised.
On the night of April 20th, 1989, a young woman named Patricia Meehan got into her car and started driving down Montana's Highway 200, but she was going the wrong way. She collided head-on with another vehicle, but miraculously, no one was seriously injured. What happened next left investigators and the entire country stunned. Patricia climbed out of her car, looked directly at the other driver, then silently walked into a field. She was never seen again. Or was she? Over the next several years, thousands of people across the country claimed to have seen her. From Montana to Washington to as far as New York, a woman matching Patricia's description kept appearing, always alone, always silent, and always just out of reach. Was she suffering from amnesia? Did she walk away from her life on purpose? Or did something far more sinister happen? This is Forensic Tales, episode number 294, The Bizarre Disappearance of Patricia Meehan. Before her disappearance made national headlines, Patricia Meehan lived what most people would say was a quiet, unassuming life. She was born on November 1st, 1951 in Pennsylvania, one of 4 siblings to parents Dolly and Thomas. Growing up, she was described as soft-spoken, kind-hearted, and loved animals. Those who knew her said she had a nurturing soul, someone who preferred the company of nature over the chaos of cities and crowds. Patricia initially wanted to pursue a career in early childhood education, and in order to make that happen, she attended a few college classes in Oklahoma City in early childhood development, hoping someday she'd work in a daycare. This seemed like the perfect career path for her. She absolutely loved and adored small children. But over time, her interest and career choices changed. She realized her true passion wasn't inside the classroom. Instead, she felt more happy and more passionate out in the wide open spaces of the outdoors. So she eventually left teaching behind and moved to Montana in 1985, where she got a job as a ranch hand. At first, her parents, Dolly and Thomas, weren't too concerned about the sudden move. They knew she loved animals and loved being outdoors. So moving to Bozeman, Montana wasn't that big of a deal. But sometime between 1985 and 1989, her parents started worrying about their daughter. They worried about her being alone and being isolated. And I think they had every right to feel that way. She was hundreds of miles away from home. All of her family lived in Pittsburgh, so they were really far away, and she was living on a pretty rural ranch in Montana. But still, they supported her and they supported her decisions. She seemed to like living there. And for a while, everything about this situation seemed fine. On top of working as a ranch hand, She also took a number of odd jobs to support herself. She regularly stayed in contact with her family back home. Her life was pretty normal and pretty quiet. She worked, she rented a room, she regularly spoke to her landlord. It was all totally normal. She is a very good girl, Patricia's father, Tom, would tell the Great Falls Tribune in June of 1989. She had no problems with drugs or drinks. She was a part of a close-knit family. She had a credit card and called home frequently, end quote. One of those phone calls happened the day before she went missing. On April 19th, 1989, Patricia called home saying that she felt stressed out and was thinking about moving back home. It was around this same time that other people in Patricia's life started to notice some changes in her behavior. Her friends and family noticed she seemed more anxious, withdrawn, and almost seemed paranoid. She began expressing concerns that someone was watching her. She talked about being followed. She even reportedly told her father that she felt like she was losing touch with reality. So before her parents agreed to help her move back home, they had one request for her. They wanted her to go see and meet with a psychologist, but she never did. Right after that phone call on April 19th, Patricia would be gone. The next day, April 20th, Patricia left the small town of Circle, Montana, in her car, a beige 1980 Honda Civic. She was reportedly upset that day. Earlier, she had a conversation with a friend that left her rattled. Some reports suggest she might have been headed to go see her parents, but as we know, she never made it. At around 8:15 p.m., Patricia was spotted driving the wrong way down Montana Highway 200. Witnesses said she was traveling eastbound in the westbound lane on a stretch of highway where cars can easily reach over 70 miles per hour. Then it happened. Peggy Bueller and her father were traveling west on Montana Highway 200 when they saw a car coming straight for them. Somehow, Peggy was able to swerve to get out of Patricia's way, avoiding a massive head-on collision. But her vehicle ended up crashing into another car, a car driven by an off-duty police dispatcher, a woman by the name of Carol Heights. Fortunately, Carol wasn't seriously injured in the collision and was able to get out of her car all on her own. Now, if driving the wrong way on a state highway isn't strange enough, what Patricia did next was even weirder. After the accident, Carol said she got out of her car to go check on the driver that hit her, Patricia, and this is what she said. She calmly stepped out of her wrecked car. She walked over to Carol's vehicle, stared at her silently without saying a single word, then turned around and walked away. She climbed over a nearby fence and disappeared into an open field. Patricia didn't ask if Carol was okay. She didn't even mention that the accident just happened a few minutes ago. It was like she just stepped out of her car, stopped, stared at Carol for a moment, then walked away from the accident site. She didn't go back to her car to go get anything. She just walked away. This was before most people had their own cell phones, so Peggy immediately drove to the nearest town to call the police while her dad and Carol stayed at the crash scene. But by the time the police and paramedics showed up a while later, Patricia was long gone. Her wrecked car was still parked where she left it, but there was no trace of her. No blood, no belongings, no sign that she had ever been there in the first place. Of course, aside from her totaled Honda Civic. She just stared. She never said anything. She just stared at me. I will never forget her, Carol told Unsolved Mysteries. Here's what Peggy said about it in the same interview. Quote, As I looked out across the accident, I noticed someone on the other side of the fence, standing there like a spectator, not like it happened to her." End quote. In the hours following the crash, law enforcement launched a full-scale search. This woman had just been involved in a pretty serious head-on collision, so there was a real fear that she might be seriously injured. She could be bleeding. She could have some type of massive head injury. Nobody knew at this point. The search included dozens of police officers, search dogs, helicopters, and local volunteers who wanted to help look for her. They mostly focused their search on the area surrounding Highway 200, but the terrain didn't make things easy. It was a massive search area that included wide open prairies, thick brush, and very rugged and unforgiving land. It was a very, very difficult place to comb through and search for someone. She could have easily been hurt somewhere and no one would be able to find her. Within the first few hours, the police had found something. About 3/4 of a mile away from the crash site, they found a trail of tennis shoe tracks in the dirt. And based on the size of the prints, the police thought they could have come from Patricia. But there was no way to be 100% sure. The search continued for the next 5 full days, and even Patricia's parents and family had joined in. They traveled from Pittsburgh and Florida to help the police and volunteers look for her. During that time, over 2,000 flyers with her photograph on it were put up in all of the surrounding towns. They also ramped up the search efforts. They brought in horses, ATVs to help search this difficult terrain. They searched nearby coal mines, thinking that she could be hiding inside of one of them. Her family begged the public for their help and remained hopeful that she had simply gotten lost or was suffering from either a medical or mental health crisis that caused her to simply wander off. Here's a direct quote from her dad about that. Quote, "More than anything else in the world, I want her back with us, and we would then know she was safe. Not knowing who she is taking a ride from, that's my biggest worry. I just pray day in and day out that she's with good people." End quote. But as time went on, the hope of finding Patricia began to fade. The vastness of the Montana landscape had simply swallowed her whole. The crash site itself was puzzling. No one could explain why Patricia was driving there. That particular location was over 400 miles away from where she lived in Bozeman. So what exactly was she doing out there on Highway 200 at night in the first place? And even more bizarre, and probably the question on everyone's minds, why was she driving the wrong way? Did she do it on purpose? Or could this have been some type of accident? Did she not know she was driving the wrong way? I think when most people think about wrong way drivers, they assume the driver is drunk or intoxicated. But this case is different because we don't know if she was or not. Since we have no idea where she went after the crash, no toxicology report has ever been done on her. Patricia never had a history of drinking or doing drugs, so we simply don't know if that's what caused the accident or not. On top of the shoe tracks, there was another clue discovered fairly early on. The police discovered an abandoned barn on a nearby property that looked like someone had been staying there. Inside, they found food wrappers and what looked like a makeshift bed made out of hay. So investigators thought that she had taken shelter there for the night of the accident, but there was no definitive proof it was hers. The police found nothing in the way of forensic evidence suggesting that she had ever been there. No DNA, no fingerprints, nothing. And if it had been her, why did she leave before getting help? In the weeks following her disappearance, something strange began to happen. Sightings. Not just one or two. We're talking about sightings in the thousands. And not just in Montana, but in Washington, Idaho, Wyoming, even as far away as Boston, New York, Seattle. Over 5,000 people would eventually call saying that they thought they saw her somewhere. Sometimes she was hitchhiking along highways. Other times she was spotted eating alone in a diner or just walking around through small towns. Always quiet, always alone. One of the earliest and most credible sightings came from a police officer in Minnesota who claimed to have seen her sitting inside of a Hardee's restaurant. The cop said she was drinking water all by herself in a booth for over 5 hours until the restaurant's closing time. Then after that, she walked to a nearby 24-hour diner. But when the officer said he approached her, he said she wouldn't give him her name and said that she was from Colorado. But then she changed her story and said that she was from Israel. Then less than 24 hours later, more sightings. One in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and another in Marudo. A witness in Sioux Falls said that she thought she saw Patricia sitting inside of a truck stop, drinking coffee sometime after midnight on May 5th. Later that day, another waitress reported seeing her at another diner talking to a man who appeared to be in his 30s. She also thought the woman who looked like Patricia was acting funny. Quote, "What stood out in my mind was that she seemed really disoriented and really spacey. I heard her talking to herself. She sat at the table for about an hour and a half, just looking out the window, watching people walk by. That's when I walked up to her and asked her, 'You okay?' I was wondering if there was anything I could do because she seemed so lost. I felt like she didn't know where she was or who she was." End quote. But by the time the tips were called in to the police, the woman, allegedly Patricia, was long gone. Then came more and more reports. On May 11th, a truck driver called in a tip saying he saw a woman who looked exactly like Patricia on Interstate 90 in rural Washington state. He said he offered to give her a ride, but she wouldn't take it. She said her car was broken down a few miles back and she was just looking to find a payphone. Another sighting of her was reported the following week in Tacoma, Washington, by a Port of Tacoma employee who claimed to have seen her at a truck stop off Interstate 5, asking strangers for directions. Later that month, another sighting from a waitress in Bozeman, Montana. Patty came in the door and wanted to be sat quickly and served quickly. She told me, "I'm in a hurry." And I said, "Well, we do breakfast in 10 minutes. You'll be out very quickly." And then I said to her, "You must have to be back at work." It was about 8:30. She said, "No, I'm just going shopping." I couldn't understand why it was so important for her to be there right at 9 o'clock to go shopping. She was in such a huge hurry. End quote. By June, there were a total of 25 sightings, 3 of which the police were able to confirm. Most of them came from truck stops between Seattle and Montana. And Seattle made sense because Patricia's sisters lived there. So maybe she was trying to get in touch with one of her sisters. Patricia also had an ex-boyfriend who lived in Spokane. So the area of these confirmed sightings made sense. She had at least 2 separate ties to the Seattle, Washington area. Fast forward to August, another promising sighting. This time, a woman matching Patricia's description was arrested by police in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho for littering. Even the police officers who arrested her said that they thought she had to be Patricia Meehan. She looked exactly like her. But when the woman went for her court appearance and had her fingerprints taken, it was confirmed it wasn't Patricia. She might have looked exactly like her, but it wasn't her. Over the next few years, more than 5,000 possible sightings were reported. Some people were so convinced that they had seen Patricia, they even took photographs of these people, only for the woman to disappear before law enforcement could get there. In one instance, a family in Nebraska believed that Patricia had lived with them briefly under a different name, but that claim has never been able to be verified. Even the Meehan family themselves chased down as many leads as they could. Her mother, Dolly, followed up on dozens of tips, traveling across the country, hoping to find her daughter. Each time, the lead ended in a dead end. So, what could have happened to Patricia? Why did she drive on the wrong side of the highway? And why did she bizarrely walk away from the accident scene? Well, there's no shortage of theories when it comes to this case. Let's break down each one and see how the evidence, or the lack thereof, fits with each one. The first and probably most widely accepted theory is that Patricia suffered a mental health crisis, possibly made worse from a head injury caused by the car crash. Witnesses at the scene noted that she was dazed, unresponsive, and visibly confused. Some believe she might have wandered off because she had amnesia or some type of condition where a person forgets their identity, travels away from home, often for long periods of time. If Patricia didn't remember who she was or how to get help, it's possible she kept moving, surviving in the margins of everyday society, taking odd jobs, relying on complete strangers, and intentionally avoiding attention. But here's where it gets complicated. If she was suffering from amnesia, it's likely she would eventually need some type of medical attention, and in doing so, her real identity would have likely been discovered through fingerprints, dental records, or even facial recognition once the case went national. There was a point where pretty much the entire country heard about this. So, had she walked into a hospital or an emergency room somewhere, it seems likely someone would have figured out who she really was. But that never happened. From a forensic standpoint, there's nothing. No evidence she sought help, visited a hospital, or interacted with law enforcement in any capacity. No fingerprints ever matched. No surveillance footage ever confirmed a sighting. And while it's possible she avoided all systems of identification, that kind of evasion for decades, while suffering from cognitive trauma, would be incredibly difficult. Still, many believe this theory makes the most sense, that Patricia may have been alive, lost in a fog, amnesia, moving through the shadows of society. The second theory is that she chose to disappear, that she'd become overwhelmed by life, perhaps even by her own declining mental state, and made the decision to vanish. If she planned her disappearance ahead of time, she may have used the crash as a cover-up to walk away from her life and start over somewhere. According to family and friends, she seemed depressed and withdrawn in the weeks and months leading up to what happened. There was even a point where her landlord was concerned about her behavior and thought that she was acting very strangely and out of character. So could she have been depressed? Did she walk away from her current life and wanted to start fresh as someone completely different? But her family completely rejects this idea. They say she would have never willingly abandoned them without saying a word. Sure, she might have been acting strange in the weeks before her disappearance, but they say there's no way she would have just walked away from her life. She would have contacted them by now. And again, the lack of forensic evidence is problematic. In most cases where someone chooses to disappear, eventually there's a slip up, a credit card charge, a job application, a medical record, a fingerprint in a database. There was nothing, not a single document, biological trace ever linked to Patricia after that April day in 1989. If she planned her disappearance, she executed it without making a single mistake, something almost everyone else who's attempted to do something like this has never been able to do. The third and most ominous theory is that Patricia was picked up by someone after the crash and was met by foul play. Perhaps she was abducted while walking through the fields. Maybe the sightings were cases of mistaken identity, and she never made it past the first night. If she was disoriented and walking alone near a rural highway, she would have been incredibly vulnerable. Hitchhiking was still relatively common at the time, and someone with bad intentions could have easily taken advantage of her situation. She would have been an easy target. So under this theory, she might have been abducted, harmed, and hidden far away from the crash site. The eerie part of this theory, if that's what happened, it could explain why no trace of her was ever found. There's also a chilling possibility that some of the alleged sightings over the years were real, but that Patricia wasn't free. Some have speculated that she might have been held against her will, or trapped in a situation where she couldn't speak up or get out. That could explain why she was often seen alone, quiet, withdrawn. For me, the total and complete lack of forensic evidence makes it nearly impossible to say. There were no signs of a struggle, no recovered belongings, no blood or footprints to track, no confirmed DNA. And without that kind of concrete forensic trail, no one can either rule in or rule out foul play. If she was murdered, the perpetrator left no trace. And if she's still alive, she's remained hidden longer than almost anyone else in modern history. Then there's the final possibility that she died from exposure or an injury shortly after the crash, and her body just hasn't been found. This theory suggests she never made it far, that she died of exposure, dehydration, or injury after walking into that field. This is sadly a plausible explanation. The area around the crash site is desolate. In April, temperatures in eastern Montana could drop significantly at night. If Patricia had a concussion or she was disoriented, she might have wandered off into that field until she eventually collapsed, succumbing to the elements. But here's that same problem again. There was no body, no remains, no clothing. And while rural Montana is vast, the area around the crash site was searched extensively, on foot, by helicopter, search dogs. If she had died somewhere nearby, many people believe we would have found her body by now. From a forensic perspective, this theory hinges on the assumption that search efforts missed something. It's not impossible. Nature can hide a body pretty well, but it requires us to believe that trained search teams overlooked every trace of her presence, No scent trail, no bones, nothing. Still, many searchers say the terrain is so expansive that she could have easily walked beyond the search perimeter before succumbing to the conditions. So it's entirely possible we've been searching for someone who isn't even alive at this point. Speaking of being alive, there's a lot of online speculation that Patricia might have been suicidal at the time of the accident. Many people believe she could have wanted to end her life that night by driving on the wrong side of the highway. But even if that's true, that theory doesn't explain everything. Specifically, why she decided to walk away from the crash. If she was suicidal, why get into a head-on car accident in the first place? Why risk injuring someone else if you're just intending to take your own life? I guess it's possible those situations do happen, but it doesn't answer all the questions in this case. More than 3 decades have passed since Patricia Meehan vanished on that quiet Montana highway, and still, her case remains one of the most baffling and frustrating missing person investigations in modern history. Despite the thousands of reported sightings, no one is sure where she is today. No bank activity, no driver's license renewals, no social security use, nothing that would indicate she's alive or building a new life under a different identity. Her family has never given up hope completely. Over the years, they've worked with local and national media to keep her face in the public eye, and they have followed up on every viable tip, no matter how unlikely it is. The FBI, which was involved in the case early on, eventually stepped back due to the lack of actionable leads. Still, Patricia's case is technically open, though it's considered cold. And even now, ever so often, someone claims they've seen her, a woman who looks exactly like her, quiet, alone, passing through. Those tips every so often still come in. But just like all the others that came before it, those sightings never lead anywhere. What happened to Patricia Meehan may never fully be understood. Whether she disappeared by choice, by accident, or by force, her story remains a haunting reminder of how a person can seemingly vanish into thin air, with the world watching and no trace left behind. In a world where science can reconstruct events from the smallest trace, skin cells, hair fibers, tire tracks, her case offers nothing. No fingerprints after the crash, no DNA, no confirmed personal items, no confirmed photo or footage, no recovered remains. It's like she stepped off the road and off the grid, leaving behind only questions. This is one of those rare stories that just sticks with you, not because of what we know, but because of everything we don't. How does someone vanish in front of witnesses? How can a woman be seen thousands of times across the country, yet never truly found? Patricia's disappearance reminds us that even in the age of constant surveillance and endless information, it's still possible for someone to slip through the cracks. In November 1989, the case was featured on NBC's Unsolved Mysteries, Season 2, Episode 6, which would have been Patricia's 38th birthday. If you have any information about Patricia Meehan's disappearance, or if you believe you might have seen her, you're urged to contact the Montana Department of Justice or your local FBI field office. Even the smallest detail could make a difference. To see photos of Patricia and learn more about this case, visit our website, forensictales.com. I'll also include a few key links in the show notes. On April 20th, 1989, she was 5'3", 117 pounds. She has green eyes and strawberry blonde hair with freckles across her fair complexion. To share your thoughts on this week's episode, follow us on Instagram and Facebook. If you want to hear my personal take on the case, sign up to become a patron at patreon.com/forensictales. After each episode, I release a bonus episode where I share my personal thoughts on the case in more detail. Don't forget to subscribe to Forensic Tales so you never miss an episode. We release a new episode every Monday. If you love the show, please consider leaving us a positive review. It helps the show grow. You can also support the show through Patreon. Thank you for joining me this week. Be sure to tune in next week for a new case. Until then, remember, not all stories have happy endings. Forensic Tales is a Rockefeller audio production. The show is written and produced by me, Courtney Fretwell. If you'd like to help create compelling new cases, fund research, and assist with production and editing costs, you can support the show with a small monthly contribution. In return, you'll be one of the first to listen to new ad-free episodes and gain access to exclusive content. To learn more, visit patreon.com/forensictales. Forensic Tales is a podcast made possible by our Patreon producers: Tony A., Christine B., Sherry A., Michael D., Nicola, Megan G., Ureli, Jerry, Ann F., Carol A., Shannon D., Marianne C., Lois B., Lynn H., Ashley H., Danielle D., Chrissy D., Brett R., Luz Raquel, and Christine K. If you'd like to become a producer of the show, head over to our Patreon page or email me at courtney@forensictales.com. For a complete list of sources used in this episode, please visit forensictales.com. Thank you for listening. I'll see you next week. Until then, remember, not all stories have happy endings.